Good morning. Let us look at the analysis of the poem The Scholar Gypsy by Matthew Arnold, which is prescribed for the students of English Literature BA Part 3 in Paper 1. Matthew Arnold is recognized as one of the most well known poets of the Victorian era. Victorian poetry focused on using sentimentality and imagery to convey the feelings or message the poet wished to express. The topics of nature and romantic ideals were common points of inspiration for writers of the Victorian period. In his poem The Scholar Gypsy, Matthew Arnold uses many examples of vivid imagery to paint a picture of the natural world surrounding the speaker. As the speaker is reclining somewhere near Oxford, he describes the beauty of the natural world all around him. He says, "Through the thick corn the scarlet poppies peep, and round green roots and yellowing stalks I see. Pale pink convolvulus in tendrils creep, and air-swept lindens yield their scent and rustle down their perfumed showers of bloom on the bent grass where I am laid." As the speaker takes in his surroundings, he begins to narrate the main story that flows through the poem. It revolves around a friend that the speaker knew at Oxford who chose to leave his studies to join a band of traveling gypsies, Romany people. This friend that he knew chose to pursue a different type of life, a life of freedom, travel, and exploration of the world, and Roma customs, transforming him into the scholar gypsy. Nature is the backdrop that is woven throughout the entire poem, representing the freedom the speaker longs for, an escape from what wears out the mortal life of men. The speaker describes the adventures of the scholar gypsy with color and vividness, as in the dark bluebells or purple orchises. The scholar gypsy represents what the speaker wishes he could be: a truant boy nursing thy project in unclouded joy, and every doubt long blown by time away. In contrast, the speaker feels he is stuck in a much different reality, and he longs to return to his carefree days at Oxford when he was younger and the world was his. Though this poem explores one of Arnold's signature themes, the depressing monotony and toil of modern life, it is unique in that it works through a narrative. There are, in fact, two levels of storytelling at work in the poem: that of the scholar gypsy and that of the speaker, who is grappling with the ideas poised by that singular figure. Both levels of story relay the same message. The scholar gypsy has transcended, means he has gone beyond or risen higher than life by escaping modern life. As he usually does, Arnold here criticizes modern life as wearing down even the strongest of men. His choice of the word disease is telling, since it implies that his lifestyle is contagious. That is, even the narrator would like, the speaker also would like to follow that lifestyle or live that lifestyle. Even those who try to avoid modern life, which will eventually become infected. In this way, the poem makes a comment on the perils of conformity as other poems in this collection do. What makes the scholar gypsy so powerful is not only that he wishes to avoid modern life, many wish to do that. More importantly, he is willing to entirely repudiate normal society for the sake of his transcendence. There is a slightly pessimistic worldview implicit in that idea, since it is clearly not possible to revel in true individuality. Revel means to enjoy or live in pleasure and still be a part of society. In other words, if you are a part of a society, you have to belong to that society and live its ways. The scholar gypsy has had to turn his back entirely on Oxford, which represents learning and modernity here, in order to become this great figure. And yet, the poem overall is much more optimistic than many of Arnold's works, precisely because it suggests that we can transcend if we are willing to pay that cost. Transcend means go beyond. This makes it different from a poem like A Summer Night, which explores the same theme but laments, meaning expresses sorrow or regret, the cost of separation that individuality requires. In other words, if you want to live life on your own terms, then you will be separated from the society of which you are a part, because people will not, perhaps not accept your way of life. For all his admiration, the speaker clearly has not yet mustered the strength, mustered means gathered the strength to repudiate the world, to give up the world. The setting helps establish his contradictory feelings. The poem begins with images of peaceful, serene rural life, a place where men act as they always have. They have been untouched by the perils, means dangers, or threats of modernity. Pastoral imagery, pastoral means relating to the country life, and country life means life in the rural regions, village life, in other words. Pastoral imagery has always been associated in poetry with a type of innocence and purity, unfiltered humanity in touch with nature. The speaker is out in the field contemplating this type of life, the possibility of acting as the scholar gypsy did. And yet, he is also studying the towers of Oxford, which, as mentioned above, represents the rapidly changing, strictly structured world that the scholar gypsy renounced. Renounced means gave up or rejected. Arnold deftly, skillfully, expertly expresses the speaker's split priorities through this juxtaposition. Juxtaposition means when two opposing ideas are brought together. At the same time that he admires the scholar gypsy, he cannot fully turn his back on the modern world. This is the juxtaposition. It is the same contradiction that plays the speaker of A Summer Night. Thus, the poem overall represents Arnold's inner conflict, his desire to live a transcendent life, but inability to totally eschew society, means to give up society. At this point in his life, Arnold felt pulled in different directions by the world's demands. He was trying to resist the infection of modernization, but it was creeping up on him, nevertheless, and the pressure to conform was negatively affecting his poetry. Undoubtedly, Arnold wished he could escape in the way the scholar gypsy did. However, he was too tied down by responsibilities to even dream of doing so. We will now look at the themes in the poem The Scholar Gypsy. The first theme, the boredom bred by modern life. One of the themes of The Scholar Gypsy by Matthew Arnold is the ennui and boredom bred by modern life. The narrator of the poem clearly finds everyday modern life lacking in excitement and inspiration. He describes everyday life in the following way. Repeated shocks again exhaust the energy of strongest souls. Everyday life is wearying and exhausts the mind and body. It is from this kind of wearying means tiring life, that the scholar gypsy of lore has escaped. The narrator admires the scholar gypsy for being able to find release from the life of a scholar in Oxford. Instead, the scholar gypsy escapes into nature with a band of gypsies or Romani people. The gypsies represent a group that does not follow modern industrial patterns, but instead still wanders and tries to make a life by reading people's minds. Wanders means people who move from one place to another without any definite aim. हिंदी में जिसको हम भटकना कहेंगे. The next theme is nature as release from modern life. Another theme in the way is the way in which nature provides a release from modern life. At the beginning of the poem, the narrator is watching shepherds in a pasture. Pasture means grassland. घास का मैदान. Stalks of flowers shade him from the sun, and the narrator sees the towers of Oxford in the distance. These towers represent the ugly, unwanted intrusion of modern life into a perfectly pastoral scene. Later, the narrator believes he and others see the scholar gypsy in fields and pastures. The scholar gypsy has a free, unfettered life in nature, which represents the freedom of life before the industrial age. Nature as inspiration. A related theme is the inspiration that comes from nature. Arnold writes about the scholar gypsy, "Thou waitest for the spark from heaven." The narrator believes that the scholar gypsy is able to receive divine inspiration and is closer to the sources of this inspiration than he himself is. In contrast, the narrator says that people in modern life are light half believers of our casual creeds. The narrator believes that modern people are not believers in anything and have no real convictions. The scholar gypsy is closer to sources of authentic joy than the narrator and others living modern lives are. While nature brings the scholar gypsy a life of happiness and creativity, modern people in a more industrial world lead stale, uninspired lives. Let us now take a look at the characters in the poem The Scholar Gypsy. Matthew Arnold's poem The Scholar Gypsy is based on Joseph Glanvill's The Vanity of Dogmatizing. It has three main characters and a group of unnamed minor characters. First is Joseph Glanvill. Joseph Glanvill is in the preface of the poem. He was a real-life English philosopher and clergyman, meaning he was a priest in the church, in the 1600s, who argued for rationalism, tolerance, and science. But he also argued for the existence of witches and evil spirits, and his writings were often used to justify witch hunts. The speaker. The poem speaker, usually considered to be Arnold himself, introduces, tells, and comments upon the story of the wandering scholar as he sits on a hill above Oxford with Glanvill's book. The scholar gypsy himself. The scholar gypsy of the title is a poor Oxford student who joins a wandering band of gypsies or Romany people. The term gypsy is usually considered derogatory today. In other words, people do not respect a person who behaves or lives like a gypsy. The scholar realized Romani have their own forms of learning. Once he has learned all the he can from them, he will share it with the rest of the world. In the 20th century, scholar Marjorie Hope Nicholson identified the scholar as based on Francis Mercury van Helmont, an alchemist, diplomat, pioneering early chemist, and believer in an esoteric school of thought called Kabbalah. The scholar's colleagues. Two colleagues of the scholar gypsy from Oxford also make a brief appearance in the poem, sharing what they know of the gypsies. The gypsies. The unnamed members of the band of Romani people, gypsies, share their knowledge as well. Romani people are believed to have originally come from India, making their way across the Middle East and North Africa, eventually to Europe and then the rest of the world. In Europe, they faced strong stigmas and much persecution and violence, even pogroms and genocide during the Holocaust alongside Jews. They were often accused of or associated with thievery or deception. Thievery means stealing, and deception means fooling people. In many stories, they are portrayed as fortune tellers or practitioners of magic, including the casting of curses said to bring bad luck or misfortune. That's all for this session. Thank you and goodbye.